Right, we are back with more Vue.js org documentation. We are in the Fallthrough attributes section. Let's review what we have just seen, because there is one point here to keep in mind. It's a bit far-fetched to try to do this, but well, it's good to know that it exists and it works like that. Forwarded attributes may be accepted as props by base button if declared it. So going back to our example, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I recommend you watching the previous video first. Going back to our example, we had all these Fallthrough attributes, and here we have this app with a my button with some Fallthrough attributes, because in my button they are not defined at all, which renders a base button. And what it's telling us that we can have this define props with the class if we wanted to. And then we could add them here like so. Basically, we are having a class attribute with a value button in my button, because in my button it doesn't have any prop with named class defined. It falls through the base button, and the base button has a defined prop class, a class prop defined, and we can use it as a regular prop. That's what it's telling us here. And the same can be applied to event listeners. All right, let's continue. Disabling attribute inheritance. If you do not want a component to automatically inherit attributes, you can set inherited false in the components option. All right, let's give it a try. Actually, wait. If using script setup, you will need to declare this option using a separate normal script block. I see. So we need this thing. Let's give it a try. Let's pick this component and say we don't want our attributes to fall through. And then, well, here, because attributes don't fall through anymore, we were passing this class button attribute. Here we say, yeah, I don't care, don't pass fall through attributes to the base button. And so the base button, even if it takes a class prop, it's not defined because we are not passing it through. We are telling Vue, hey, stop right here, man. Don't pass anything down to this guy. We would have to explicitly pass attributes. I think we'll see that now, how to do it. The commonest scenario for disabling attribute inheritance is when attributes need to be applied to other elements besides the root node. Aha, I see. By setting the inherit attributes option to false, you can take full control over where the fall through attributes should be applied. These fall through attributes can be accessed directly in template expressions as $attrs. The attrs object includes all attributes that are not declared by the component's props or emits options, for example, class, style, beyond listeners, and so on. So for example, if in the base button, for some reason, later on we decide to do, not here, wait. In the my button, for some reason, we decided to no longer have the base button as root, but we have some div with some text. And then whatever we have there, let's comment this out for a second so we see actually the effect. Before we would expect without this that the button is colored because of this class being passed down automatically up to this base button. But because this thing is no longer the root, then we no longer know the view no longer knows where to pass it, so it doesn't at all. And even if there was one single root, like so, now it's because of the indentation, it's a bit hard, but now there is one single root, and you see actually there's styles being applied, but to the div, not to the button, because this is messed up now. As we inspect, then we have a div, which is this one, which is actually the one which has the class button. But we want not the div, but the base button to have the class. So what we have to do is use inherit at false. Now this style is no longer applied to the div, as you can see. Yeah, it was here, it's no longer there. And then what it's telling us here is that we can access all these Fallthrough attributes with $address. And if I try to console, actually, if I try to print them out, there you go. You have this attribute class button. We can access it like that. So we could do make class dynamic and then do $address.class. Then voila, we have our styles applied to the button, because now we are explicitly passing them down. And I'm gonna get rid of this for a second. I'm just gonna get rid of this. Now we still have them there because we don't set explicitly a prop called class, and this will just automatically add the styles to the class of the base button here. As you can see, if we inspect this thing, we have the base button, but also the button class. Now we can even go a step further here, getting rid of this. We lose the styles again, and we can use bvine and cross fingers. I hope it works. There you go. There you go, because we are now binding this $address object to the base button. Now, basically, before all these shenanigans where we have this guy being the root of the component, now we added some additional HTML, and this guy is no longer the root, but we still want the styles which fell through the parent to be applied to this thing. So this whole thing can be accomplished by using this inherit address, setting it to false, and then binding the $address object to whatever component we want to have all these address passed down. So there you go. That's the magic. That's also quite important now. So, all right, where were we? The Fallthrough attributes can be accessed like this. Yeah, we've gone through that already. Some notes. Unlike props, Fallthrough attributes preserve their original casing in JavaScript. So an attribute like foobar needs to be accessed as $address square single quote foobar. That's JavaScript notation. You should know it. If you don't know it, yeah, look, Google for JavaScript square notation, I think it's called. It's basically a way to access object properties, alternative to the dot notation. But okay, honestly, you should know this. A v-on event listener like @click will be exposed on the object as a function under $address on click. Okay. All right. That's important to know, I guess. That's a potential gotcha. Using our myButton component example from the previous section, sometimes we may need to grab the actual button element with an extra div for styling purposes, like so. We want all Fallthrough attributes like class and v-on listeners to be applied to the inner button, not the outer div. We can achieve this with inherit address false and vbind address. Exactly what I did before. Remember that vbind without an argument binds all the properties of an object as attributes of the target element. Attribute inheritance on multiple nodes, on multiple root nodes. Unlike components with a single root node, components with multiple root nodes do not have an automatic attribute fall-through behavior. If $ads are not bound explicitly, a runtime warning will be issued. We have a custom layout with an ID custom layout and an on-click change value. If custom layout has the following multi-root template, there will be a warning because view cannot be sure where to apply the fall-through attributes. The warning will be suppressed if $ads is explicitly bound. Alright. Accessing fall-through attributes in JavaScript. If needed, you can access a component's fall-through attributes in script setup using the useAttrs API. So we import useAttrs from Vue, and then we can access the attrs by just calling this as a function. If not using script setup, attrs will be exposed as a property of the setup context. So we have our setup, our props as a first argument, and our context as a second argument, and the context contains a key attrs, and that's how we can access the attrs. Note that although the attrs object here always reflects the latest fall-through attributes, it isn't reactive for performance reasons. You cannot use watchers to observe its changes. If you need reactivity, use a prop. Alternatively, you can use an updated to perform side effects with latest attrs on each update. How? That's the question. On updated is a lifecycle hook which registers a callback to be called after the component has updated its DOM tree due to a reactive state change. Okay. I guess an update occurs, then that lifecycle hook is triggered. And inside the lifecycle hook, we can access any new values after the update. But this on itself is not reactive. So this will not trigger any watchers. We cannot make, I guess, then computed properties out of that. Okay. So leaving that aside, I would say deal with attrs. Be careful when you deal with attrs. Be careful. Don't treat them as any kind of other reactive data. If you want reactive data, use props, as it says here. Oof. All right, so next slots, but as you may expect, first let's have a little break.